Hello, I'm Dr. Elizabeth Cook, and I'm returning for episode 3 of the Electric Utility Transformational Education series. I put together this series to really weave together the importance of leadership, operational excellence, and the need for public engagement with the technical and business fundamentals of the electric utility industry to not only inspire, but to guide stakeholders through the transformation that we are all occurring today. So why I feel the need and kind of my space, as I mentioned in episode 1 and 2, that I do have my doctorate in electrical engineer, and I spent the last 20 years helping her within the utility space, building models, gathering the data required, and running the analytics to really understand and ensure that the grid continues to run reliably and safe. Over the last 5 or 6 years, I found a fire being lit within me to understand the gap between who we are as leaders and workers within this space and who we need to be to ensure that we unlock opportunity and the capability of each individual to be inspired to produce and create work that brings value not only to themselves, but to the community we serve. That is a lot, but I truly developed and created an amazing and multiple teams that started to identify with the power of working for a space that brings the commodity that is the lifeline to society, the electric power grid, to an individual homes of their friends, families, and the communities they serve. The vision that was set was also under pressure that there is a transformation occurring, that from the last 100 years, the design and the operation of the grid is changing because there is now available to us technologies that can unlock the grid's current capabilities as well as be taken into consideration to transform to a grid that will serve all of this new way of creating and using energy. From my experience, understanding that what we say, how we say things, and the value that we bring to any conversation or meeting or work product is very important. And that each individual within this space is a leader. So a couple of my passions, and I shared them in the previous episode, is being the best version of myself and understanding the tools and the mechanics and the language to use, not only to show up as that for me, but for my 6 children and my family and friends. So really understanding the management of my energy on a day-to-day basis, no pun intended. The second passion I have is energy management of the electric power grid. And to be able to manage that energy, you have to understand the grid holistically, not just from the policy, regulatory, or financial, but really from the core physicality and the physics thereof of what is electricity. My third passion is history. And so putting those all together is a base knowledge of what it means to be the best version of yourself, and tying those individual assets as a person creates an intrinsic value to the work I bring. With that, I wanted to kind of come back to the first topic in episode 1, is what are some key traits or attributes in regards to being that best version. So it is personal development. It's somewhat shunned on in individual crowds, but if you understand that developing yourself and growing within, you actually become available to more moments of joy. And also, I think, is the unlocking of where we need to go in the energy sector. It also allows you to lead the change and be an impact from a personal perspective as well as an organizational perspective as you move forward. The next couple of episodes, I'm continuously going to tie in little tidbits of what is the electric power grid and the learnings, but we're going to also remember that to be a part of this transformation as an individual leader, we must engage all stakeholders. So engaging our society in this transformation. What does that look like and how do we do it? The other is understanding the business and the regulatory landscapes. Seeing all of the parts that are working together or working against each other, understanding it to then realize the steps that one can take to really help the transformation. And then lastly, we're gonna really wrap it up in creating the sustainable and resilient grid. So I've said these words a couple times in the last 2 episodes, but as an electric utility space, the job is to ensure the delivery of electricity 24/7, 365. The expectations of our customers. Not possible, but we do strive to achieve. But within that is safe, affordable, and reliable. The new language that is now on top of those three is sustainable and resilient. So we'll get into what that means. So becoming the best version of yourself. I joke and I laugh because I think this language and really the leadership classes and there's so much information available to us, and a lot of it is proposed or presented to people in places where they're not ready to receive it. And so if we could get sharp around the language and the awareness of the benefit it provides not only to oneself, but to those that they are leading within a community as well as an organization, is really powerful. This may not hit the mark, but it also is just the reality that how we show up in the electric utility space, you need to realize that it's not an easy path. And you're gonna be challenged every day by all the various stakeholders. But like I said in episode 1, growth does not occur unless you're uncomfortable. And within the sea of no's is your yes. And I'll just throw in one there to be corny, but obstacles do not block the path, they are the path. I spoke of this word, and it's said a lot, and I think a lot of my reflection, there's something I do on a daily basis. I journal. I really dig in deep on a daily basis of things that I need to do, things that are within my mind that need to be executed on, and just create goals. Goals that are achievable. And I do not criticize myself or get into a funk if those goals are not being achieved, because I cap my day or bookend my day with reflections. And I determine, what about that day was I not able to achieve said sought after goal? And within that space, it gives you a safe space within your own mind to be a visionary leader and thinker for yourself. Another area to realize is that we all are experts in something. It's either the job that we do, the reality that we face, or the hardships that we have endured. If we get real specific, we can be an expert, and we are. But if you don't do the deep dives in your own gifts, you'll never know. So one thing also, being an expert is you're a continuous learner. Getting really granular in that technical expertise, especially in the electric utility space, is important. Trying to see the bigger picture instead of the one individual motive that may be driving you. Another big asset of being a leader in this space is the emotional intelligence. It's the ability to really marriage one's emotions and understand the influence thereof. So this is something that I was gifted as a child, was always being applauded or stated that to sit with whatever emotion arised, and no emotions were bad. So every day you may feel as if you're getting beaten down or being told no, or that your communication's ineffective. But those are all opportunities to learn. But also, if you are not in a space where you feel comfort in all of those sticky emotions, you avoid them. And then you don't have the opportunity to learn from what may have came to be. Another tactic, and I think I used this in the first episode, is adaptability. Where you set off and where you want to go, and I think there's a ton of memes that show this, it is not a straight line. You will have the bumps, you will have the valleys, and you will have the highs. And that in itself is the journey. Being adaptable and realizing that you're not going to win every conversation or have the best analysis or hit the mark on your story that you're trying to share with your peers, but to understand that being in a space where you can flex or be adaptable to others' ideas or phenomena. And I also find I learned a lot about this from a core techie perspective, is when I was working on my doctorate, I not only was studying power systems and the connectivity thereof, but I started to learn all about machine learning and data analytics. And one thing I found, it's just beautiful mathematics to a much larger scale. Did I want to learn mathematics and calc and all of those 20 years after leaving school? Maybe not. But I tied myself to this path that kept showing up continuously. I sought for going to place B, and I found in the journey, aka developing the equations and getting into all the geeky algorithms, you sometimes identified B1, B2, B3. And if you didn't take that journey or that quest or dive in deep to get to B, I would not have learned about B1, B2, B3. That shows up in many ways if we're intentional and aware of what's happening on a day-to-day basis by the actions we take. Just pulling back, as stated in episode 2, and we'll get into more little dirty deeds, the electric power grid is changing on all 4 components: bulk generation, transmission, distribution, the grid edge, our customers. And as I also said, we as humans do not like change. And we as humans also do not always tie what we do 9 to 5 to a larger idea. There are a cluster, and many of us, that do tie our identity to the value of the work that we produced. And I always imagine, what if everyone believed that when they showed up for whatever work or task that's assigned to them, that they see the bigger picture? It kind of reminds me of the bricklayers. Maybe you've heard the story, but there's 3 gentlemen laying bricks. A gentleman walking by approached the one gentleman and said, "Hey, what are you guys doing here?" He's like, "I'm laying bricks. That's my job." The second guy said, "Well, actually, I'm an artist. I do the mortar and I make sure the balance and the wall will be structurally sound and I will build a beautiful wall." The third saw his task as building a cathedral that will last generations to come. I think that's a beautiful story. So as leaders, is there ways to show up in your space around the people that you are either in charge of leading, or your peers, or even those that you report to? Is if you tie your value, your work, your expertise, and knowing you're showing up best as yourself, can that generate and inspire us all to do the same? And because the grid is changing in all 4 components, each of the individual workers are also being requested or required to change. So that causes strife. That's why I think it's important to say the words, speak to what is happening, and then we all can navigate it together. So, strategies for leading transformative change within a utility. Here they are. Stakeholder engagement. Engaging stakeholders early and often is key. I've learned this the hard way. This includes employees, customers, regulators, and the community. This requires a very different talent than the technical capabilities and the subject matter experts of the grid. This requires a team. It requires transparent communication and involving stakeholders in a change process to mitigate the resistance. There's a whole phenomenon called change management, cultivating a culture of innovation. This starts from the top, but it can be created from the bottom, and it should be met halfway in between. Encourage a culture that values creativity, experimentation, and learning from failure. These are words that are typically not used in the hierarchical systems that we've created over the 100 years to get where we are today. There are ways and mechanisms to do this safely, as well as affordably, and ensure the grid is reliable, resilient, and sustainable. So just remember that language, the new workforce, the leaders, that is a different way of thinking and should be learned and embraced and move forward. And I mentioned change management, but that in itself, there are proven methodologies to structure and guide this process. Those words, this language, does not always resonate with the individual workers that do not see the bigger picture of how these various traits are important to really give them the freedom, the creativity, and the liberty to see extreme value in what they do or are assigned to do on a day-to-day basis. And lastly, lead by example. Really demonstrating this commitment and having that positive attitude and understanding the fundamentals I just explained. If we can take that a +1, +1, +1, we can transform the way we think and how we come to the table and create the win-win-win solutions that are required for the industry to transform.